Have you ever wondered how cruel money can make a person become? Let me tell you the story of a beautiful, elegant woman, daughter of a real estate tycoon, admired by all of Los Angeles high society. But behind that perfect makeup and seductive smile, she was willing to burn a 2-year-old child, poison an innocent soul with sedatives, and frame a poor nanny to seize $50 million in inheritance. And the man, the notorious mafia boss whom the entire underworld feared, the father of that child, almost believed every word that venomous snake whispered, almost fired the only woman who truly loved his daughter, until one afternoon, when he returned to his Beverly Hills mansion earlier than planned and witnessed a scene that made him, a man who had never shed a single tear in front of his enemies, collapse onto the grass and weep uncontrollably, crying like he hadn't cried since the day his wife died in his arms 2 years ago. But to understand why a mafia boss would cry like a child on the lawn of his own mansion, we have to go back to that very morning. That morning, Dominic Castellano sat in his office on the 40th floor of the Castellano Tower in downtown Los Angeles. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city sprawling beneath him like a kingdom waiting to be conquered. His desk, carved from a single piece of Italian black marble, held nothing but a crystal whiskey glass and a phone that rarely rang with good news. Dominic was reviewing documents for a new shipment coming through the port of Long Beach when his phone buzzed. The name on the screen made his jaw tighten. "Victoria," he answered on the second ring. What came through the speaker was not the sultry, confident voice he had grown accustomed to. Instead, he heard sobbing, hysterical, breathless sobbing that seemed to choke on every word. "Dominic. Oh God. Dominic. You have to come home right now." His grip on the phone tightened until his knuckles turned white. "What happened? Is it Lily?" "It's that woman. That Emma." Victoria's voice cracked with theatrical precision. "I caught her, Dominic. I saw everything with my own eyes. She was shaking Lily so hard I thought she would break the baby's neck. And when I tried to stop her, she screamed at me, called me terrible names, said I had no right to give orders in your house." Dominic felt something dark and primal rising in his chest. His daughter. Someone had dared to touch his daughter. "There's more," Victoria continued, her sobs perfectly timed between revelations. "My diamond earrings are missing, the ones you gave me for our 6-month anniversary. I found Lily's room in complete chaos. Dirty diapers everywhere. Empty bottles. I don't think that woman has fed Lily properly in days. She's been stealing from us and abusing your child while you work yourself to death trying to provide for everyone." The crystal glass in Dominic's other hand shattered. Whiskey and blood mixed together, dripping onto the marble desk. But he felt nothing. Not the sting of the cuts. Not the burn of the alcohol in his wounds. Only rage. Pure, blinding, volcanic rage. "I'm coming home," he said, his voice so low it barely registered as human. "Don't let her leave that house." He ended the call without waiting for a response. Dominic stood up so fast his leather chair flew backward and crashed against the bookshelf. He grabbed his suit jacket, not bothering to wrap his bleeding hand, and stormed toward the elevator. His 2 bodyguards, seasoned men who had seen him order executions without blinking, exchanged nervous glances but said nothing. They had never seen the boss like this. The black Bentley Continental waited in the underground parking garage. Dominic slid behind the wheel himself, something he rarely did. Today, he needed control. He needed speed. He needed to feel the engine roar beneath him like the fury roaring inside his chest. The car shot through the streets of Los Angeles like a bullet. Red lights meant nothing. Traffic laws meant nothing. Other drivers honked and cursed, but one glimpse of the black Bentley with tinted windows and they quickly moved aside. Everyone in this city knew that car. Everyone knew the man who owned it. As he drove, Dominic's mind painted pictures of violence. He imagined Emma's face when he would confront her. He imagined dragging her out of his house by her hair. He imagined making her pay for every tear his daughter had shed, every moment of fear Lily had endured. In his world, people who hurt children did not receive trials or prison sentences. They received unmarked graves in the desert outside Las Vegas. The Bentley screeched to a halt in front of the Beverly Hills mansion. The property sat behind 12-foot walls topped with security cameras that recorded every angle. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter around the clock. This was not merely a home. This was a fortress designed to protect everything Dominic loved from the enemies he had accumulated over 2 decades in the underworld. He stepped out of the car, his Italian leather shoes crunching against the gravel driveway. The afternoon sun blazed overhead, but Dominic felt cold. The kind of cold that came from within, the kind that preceded death. Marco, his most trusted guard, approached quickly. "Boss, we weren't expecting you until—" "Where is she?" Dominic cut him off. Where's the nanny? Last I checked, she was in the garden but Dominic was already walking toward the main entrance, his bleeding hand leaving a trail of crimson drops on the white marble steps. Then he stopped. Something was wrong. The mansion was quiet. Not the peaceful quiet of nap time. Not the organized quiet of a well-run household. This was something different. Something that made Dominic's instincts, honed by years of surviving in a world where betrayal lurked around every corner, suddenly shift from rage to confusion. There was no crying. For the past 2 years, ever since Elena had died, this house had been filled with the sound of Lily's tears. Constant, heartbreaking, inconsolable crying that had driven away 7 professional nannies and haunted Dominic's dreams every single night. But now, there was only silence. And then, cutting through that silence like a beam of light through darkness, came a sound that made Dominic's heart stop beating. Laughter. A child's laughter. His daughter's laughter. Dominic froze in the doorway, his bleeding hand forgotten, his rage suspended in midair like a held breath. That sound, that impossible, miraculous sound. He had not heard his daughter laugh in 8 months. Not since the last nanny quit. Not since the doctors started using words like attachment disorder and developmental delays. Not since Victoria had convinced him that Lily was broken beyond repair, that some children were simply born difficult, that perhaps Elena's death had damaged the baby in ways that could never be healed. But there it was. Laughter. Pure, bubbling, crystalline laughter that floated through the mansion like music from another world. Dominic did not enter through the front door. Something made him hesitate. Perhaps it was instinct. Perhaps it was the part of him that had survived countless assassination attempts by trusting his gut when logic failed. Whatever the reason, he turned and walked silently along the side of the house, following the path of Portuguese stone that led to the garden behind the mansion. The afternoon sun cast long golden shadows across the perfectly manicured hedges. The scent of roses and jasmine hung heavy in the warm California air. Dominic moved like a ghost, his years of training allowing him to approach without making a single sound. He positioned himself behind the tall boxwood hedge that separated the pool area from the main garden, and through a small gap in the foliage, he looked. What he saw made his heart stop. There, in the center of the emerald green lawn that cost a fortune to maintain, lay Emma Sullivan, the nanny he had come to destroy. The woman Victoria had accused of abuse and theft. She was lying face down on the grass, still wearing her simple blue uniform, not caring at all that it was getting stained with grass and dirt. On her back, yellow rubber cleaning gloves still on her hands as if she had abandoned her chores mid-task. She had become a human playground. And there was Lily, his daughter, his silent, crying, troubled daughter who had not smiled in months. She was sitting on Emma's back like a tiny knight riding a horse, her chubby little hands gripping Emma's shoulders, her mouth wide open in a grin that showed all 4 of her new teeth, her honey-colored eyes sparkling with pure, unadulterated joy. Emma was singing, not a professional lullaby from an educational CD, not a scientifically approved melody designed for optimal brain development, just a simple, old-fashioned song, slightly off-key, filled with warmth and tenderness. Hush, little baby, don't say a word. Mama's gonna buy you a mockingbird. Every few words, Emma would bounce slightly, making Lily squeal with delight. The baby kicked her tiny legs, waved her arms in the air, and produced that sound, that beautiful, impossible sound of pure happiness. Dominic gripped the hedge so hard the branches cut into his already wounded palm, but he felt nothing. He could not feel anything except the earthquake happening inside his chest. This was not the scene of abuse Victoria had described. This was not a negligent caretaker ignoring a suffering child. This was something else entirely. Something Dominic had paid millions of dollars trying to create with expensive specialists, imported toys, and professional caregivers. This was love. Real, genuine, unconditional love. Emma rolled over carefully, cradling Lily against her chest, and sat up on the grass. She held the baby close, pressing her lips against those soft, dark curls that looked exactly like Elena's hair, and whispered something that made Lily giggle again. The nanny's face was radiant. Not the forced smile of an employee performing her duties, not the tired expression of someone counting the hours until her shift ended. Emma was glowing with a happiness that seemed to come from somewhere deep within her soul, as if holding this child was not a job but a privilege, not a burden but a blessing. And Lily, his daughter, looked at Emma with complete trust, complete devotion, complete security, the same way she used to look at Elena in those few precious weeks before tragedy struck. Dominic stood frozen behind the hedge, unable to move, unable to speak, unable to process what his eyes were showing him. This was Lily's laughter, the laughter he had not heard since Elena died in his arms 2 years ago. Dominic remained hidden behind the hedge, watching the scene unfold before him like a dream he was terrified to wake from. Emma lifted Lily high in the air, making airplane sounds with her mouth. The baby squealed with delight. Her tiny arms stretched wide, her face turned toward the sun. Then Emma brought her back down, nuzzling her nose against the baby's cheek in an Eskimo kiss that made Lily giggle uncontrollably. And then it happened. Lily wrapped her chubby little arms around Emma's neck, pressed her face against the nanny's shoulder, and spoke. Emma, 1 word, 2 syllables, but to Dominic, it sounded like thunder. His daughter had not spoken a single word in 8 months. The specialists had been concerned. The pediatricians had recommended evaluations. Victoria had suggested that perhaps the child was mentally deficient, that maybe she had inherited some weakness from her mother's side of the family. But here was Lily, clear as day, saying a name. Not Dada, not Mama, not any of the expensive educational words the language therapists had tried to teach her. Emma, the name of the woman Dominic had been ready to destroy. A memory flashed through his mind. Last week, when Victoria had visited the nursery, Lily had screamed the moment she saw her. The baby had thrashed and wailed, her face turning red with terror, her tiny body rigid with fear. Victoria had laughed it off, saying that children were simply unpredictable, that Lily would warm up to her eventually. But now, watching his daughter cling to Emma like she was the safest place in the entire world, Dominic understood something that shattered every belief he had held for the past 6 months. Children do not lie. Dogs and small children can sense the truth about people in ways that adults have forgotten. His grandmother had told him that once, a lifetime ago, the leather briefcase slipped from Dominic's numb fingers and hit the stone path with a heavy thud. Emma's head snapped up immediately. In one fluid motion, she pulled Lily close to her chest and turned her body to shield the baby from whatever danger might be approaching. Her eyes were wide but determined, her arms wrapped protectively around the child, her posture that of a lioness ready to defend her cub against any threat. Then she saw who it was. She saw Dominic Castellano, the most feared man in Los Angeles, standing at the edge of the garden with blood dripping from his hand, his face pale as death, his eyes filled with something she had never seen before. Emma did not cower. She did not flinch. She did not scramble to her feet and start making excuses for being caught playing instead of working. She simply smiled. A gentle, warm, genuine smile. "Lily, look," Emma whispered softly to the baby. "Daddy's home." And Lily, the child who had screamed every time Dominic entered a room for the past 2 years, the baby who seemed to associate her father with nothing but cold distance and painful absence, turned her head and looked at him. She did not cry. For the first time since Elena's funeral, his daughter looked at him without fear. Something inside Dominic's chest cracked open, something he had kept locked away behind walls of ice and steel and ruthless violence. Something that had been frozen since the night he held his dying wife in his arms and promised her he would protect their baby girl. He had failed. He had failed Elena. He had failed Lily. He had been so blinded by grief and so manipulated by a snake in designer clothing that he had almost destroyed the only person who had shown his daughter real love. The mafia boss who had ordered men executed without blinking, who had built an empire on fear and blood and unshakable power, felt his legs give way beneath him. Dominic Castellano fell to his knees on the freshly cut grass of his own garden. The Italian suit that cost more than most people's monthly salary pressed into the damp earth. His wounded hand clutched at the grass, staining the green blades red, and he wept. He wept like he had not wept since Elena died in his arms 2 years ago. He had almost fired the only woman who truly loved his daughter. He had almost believed every poisonous word that venomous snake had whispered in his ear. But how did this story begin? Where did all this darkness come from? It started with a tragedy 2 years ago, on a night that changed everything. 2 years ago, Dominic Castellano was a different man. He was still dangerous, still feared, still the undisputed king of the Los Angeles underworld. But there was light in his eyes back then. There was warmth in his voice when he came home at night. There was a reason to be something more than a monster. Her name was Elena Marie Castellano. Born Elena Reyes in a small town outside of San Diego, daughter of a mechanic and a seamstress, the first person in her family to graduate from college, a kindergarten teacher at a public school in East Los Angeles, where she spent her days teaching 5-year-olds to read and her evenings volunteering at community centers. She was everything Dominic was not. Kind where he was cruel, gentle where he was violent, hopeful where he saw only darkness. They met at a charity gala for underprivileged children. Dominic had attended only because his lawyer insisted that philanthropy was good for laundering his public image. He had planned to write a check, take a few photographs, and leave within the hour. But then he saw her. Elena stood near the refreshment table, arguing passionately with a city councilman about funding cuts to after-school programs. She wore a simple blue dress that cost less than the appetizers being served. Her dark curly hair was pinned up with what looked like a pencil. She had no idea who Dominic was, and when he approached her, she treated him exactly the same way she treated everyone else. With kindness, with directness, with absolutely no fear. "You look like a man who has never stepped inside a public school," she had said to him, her brown eyes sparkling with challenge. "I haven't," he admitted. "Then you should. Come volunteer sometime. Read to the kids. You might learn something about what really matters in life." No one had ever spoken to Dominic Castellano that way. No one had ever looked at him and seen anything other than power or danger or money, but Elena looked at him and saw a man who needed saving, and against every instinct, against every rule he had built his empire upon, Dominic fell in love. Their courtship was unconventional. He would show up at her school in his black Bentley, looking completely out of place among the minivans and school buses. She would drag him to community barbecues and church fundraisers, introducing him as my friend Dominic who needs to learn how normal people live. When he finally told her the truth about who he was, about the blood on his hands, about the empire built on fear and violence, Elena did not run. "I know who you are," she said quietly. "I've known for months, but I also know who you could be, if you let yourself." They married in a small ceremony on the beach at sunset. Elena wore flowers in her hair instead of a veil. Dominic cried when he said his vows, something his enemies would never have believed possible. When Elena announced she was pregnant, Dominic made a decision that shocked everyone in his organization. He would step back from the business. He would hand control to his underbosses. He would become legitimate, for his wife, for his child, for the family he never thought he deserved. But the underworld does not release its kings so easily. The Vargas Cartel, a rival organization that Dominic had humiliated in a territorial dispute years earlier, saw his retreat as weakness. They saw his love for Elena as a vulnerability to be exploited. On a cold night in March, when Elena was 8 months pregnant with Lily, 3 masked gunmen intercepted her car on the way home from a baby shower. They did not want money. They did not want information. They wanted revenge. The bullets meant for Elena hit her in the chest and abdomen. By the time Dominic arrived at the hospital, the doctors were already shaking their heads. "We can save the baby," the surgeon said, his voice hollow. "But your wife, I'm sorry." They performed an emergency cesarean section. Lily was born healthy, screaming, perfect, but Elena never got to hold her. She died in Dominic's arms, her blood soaking through his shirt. Her last words, a whispered plea: "Protect her, love her, don't let the darkness take you." Dominic kept the first promise. He burned the Vargas cartel to the ground in a single night of unprecedented violence. Every member, every associate, every person who had ever taken money from them. The underworld still spoke of that night in hushed whispers, the night of red vengeance. But the second promise, the one about not letting darkness take him, he broke that promise the moment Elena's heart stopped beating. From that night forward, Dominic sealed his heart in ice. He could not look at Lily without seeing Elena's eyes staring back at him. He could not hold his daughter without feeling his wife's absence like a knife in his chest. The pain was too great. The memories were too sharp. So Dominic did what he had always done when faced with unbearable emotions. He ran. He buried himself in work. He hired professionals to raise his child while he pretended that writing checks was the same as being a father. And in doing so, he left the door wide open for a predator to walk in. Lily Castellano grew up in a mansion worth $23 million, surrounded by luxury that most people could not even imagine. Her nursery was designed by the most exclusive interior decorator in Los Angeles. The crib was handcrafted in Germany, made from organic maple wood, and finished with non-toxic paint that cost more per gallon than fine champagne. The mobile hanging above it played classical Mozart, scientifically selected to optimize brain development. The closet overflowed with designer baby clothes from Paris and Milan, tiny dresses and shoes that Lily would outgrow before she ever wore them twice. The toy room next door contained every educational device recommended by child development experts. Interactive learning tablets, sensory playstations, books in 5 languages, stuffed animals so soft and expensive they came with certificates of authenticity. But none of these things could hold a baby when she cried at 3 a.m. None of them could sing lullabies or kiss away nightmares, or make a child feel safe in a world that had already taken so much from her. Dominic provided everything money could buy: He hired the most qualified nannies from the most prestigious agencies in the country, women with degrees in early childhood education, women with certifications in infant care and CPR and child psychology, women who charged $5,000 a week and came with references from celebrities and politicians. But Dominic himself was never there. He would leave for the office before Lily woke up and return after she was already asleep. On the rare occasions when their paths crossed, he would stand in the doorway of her nursery, watching her from a distance, his face a mask of stone. He could not hold her. Every time he tried, he saw Elena's eyes looking back at him from that tiny face, and the pain became unbearable. So he kept his distance. He convinced himself that he was protecting Lily from his darkness, from the violence that followed him like a shadow, from the enemies who would use any weakness against him. But in truth, he was simply running away from his own broken heart. The nannies came and went with alarming frequency. 7 different women in 2 years. Some quit because Lily's constant crying drove them to exhaustion. Others left after Victoria started her campaign of sabotage. A few simply could not handle the oppressive atmosphere of a house that felt more like a mausoleum than a home. And Lily suffered. She cried constantly. Not the normal crying of a healthy baby demanding attention. This was different, desperate, hollow. The cry of a child who had learned that no amount of screaming would bring her the comfort she needed. She did not speak. At 2 years old, when other children were stringing together simple sentences, Lily remained silent. The specialists called it selective mutism and recommended therapy. They spoke of attachment disorders and developmental delays. They suggested evaluations and interventions and special programs that cost thousands of dollars per session. Victoria, of course, had her own diagnosis. The child is defective, she told Dominic one evening over dinner, waving her wine glass dismissively. Perhaps she inherited some mental weakness from her mother's side. Some children are simply born difficult. You cannot blame yourself. And Dominic, desperate to believe anything that absolved him of responsibility, accepted her words without question. He never considered the simplest explanation, the most obvious truth. Lily did not need German cribs or French clothes or Italian nannies with impressive credentials. Lily needed love. She needed someone to hold her, not because they were paid to, but because they wanted to. She needed someone to look into her eyes and see her. Not a paycheck or a burden or a painful reminder of loss. She needed a parent, and she had none. Dominic told himself he was being a good father. He was providing security. He was ensuring her financial future. He was protecting her from the dangerous world he inhabited. But the truth was far uglier. He had abandoned his daughter in a palace of gold and left her starving for the one thing his money could never purchase. And into that void, into that canyon of emotional neglect, a serpent had slithered. Her name was Victoria Ashford, and she had been watching, waiting, planning. Victoria Ashford arrived at the Castellano mansion exactly 6 months after Elena's funeral, carrying a casserole dish and wearing a black dress that cost more than most people's monthly rent. She was the daughter of Marcus Ashford, a real estate developer who had been laundering money through Dominic's organization for over a decade. Their fathers had done business together. Their families had attended the same exclusive parties. Victoria had known about Dominic Castellano her entire life, had watched him from across crowded ballrooms, had calculated his net worth down to the last decimal point. She had also attended his wedding to Elena, sitting in the back row with a smile frozen on her face and hatred burning in her heart. How dare that plain little schoolteacher steal the most eligible bachelor in Los Angeles? How dare she waltz in with her second-hand dresses and her community college degree and claim a prize that Victoria had been positioning herself to win for years? But fate, it seemed, had corrected that injustice. Elena was dead, Dominic was broken, and Victoria saw her opportunity. She had spent those 6 months preparing carefully. She studied photographs of Elena, noting the way the dead woman styled her hair, the colors she favored, the subtle mannerisms that had captured Dominic's heart. Victoria hired a stylist to adjust her look, softening her sharp blonde features, adding warm honey highlights to her hair, choosing clothes in the soft blues and creams that Elena had loved. The transformation was subtle but effective. She did not try to become Elena. She simply tried to evoke her, to trigger those buried memories of love and comfort in Dominic's grieving mind. "I heard you've been struggling," Victoria said that first evening, placing the casserole dish on his kitchen counter with practiced grace. "I know what it's like to lose someone you love. My mother passed away 3 years ago. The loneliness can be unbearable." Her mother had actually died of a prescription drug overdose after Victoria had systematically isolated her from all her friends and convinced her to change her will. But Dominic did not know that. No one knew that. Victoria was very good at keeping secrets. Over the following months, she inserted herself into Dominic's life with surgical precision. She appeared at his office with home-cooked lunches. She attended family dinners with his elderly mother. She made herself indispensable, handling household matters that Dominic was too overwhelmed to manage, paying bills, scheduling appointments, interviewing staff. To the outside world, she was a saint, a selfless woman helping a grieving widower navigate the impossible task of raising a child alone. But behind closed doors, Victoria's true nature revealed itself. She despised Lily. The child was not a person to her but an obstacle, a squealing, demanding, inconvenient barrier standing between Victoria and everything she wanted. And what Victoria wanted was very specific. $50 million. That was the amount Dominic had placed in a trust fund for Lily on the day she was born. $50 million that would become accessible when the child turned 21, or earlier if certain conditions were met. Victoria had discovered this information by accident, glimpsing documents on Dominic's desk during one of her helpful visits. She had memorized every detail of that trust, particularly the clause that stated if the beneficiary was deemed mentally incapable of managing her own affairs, guardianship and financial control would transfer to her legal custodian. The plan crystallized in Victoria's mind like ice forming on a winter pond. Marry Dominic, become Lily's stepmother and legal guardian, then prove the child was mentally unstable, have her committed to an institution far away, and take control of $50 million. Simple, clean, profitable. But first, she needed to eliminate anyone who might interfere, anyone who might form a genuine bond with Lily, anyone who might expose Victoria's true nature before the plan was complete. The nannies had to go. Victoria began her campaign of sabotage with ruthless efficiency. Each time a new caregiver was hired, Victoria would find ways to undermine her. She would plant jewelry in the nanny's belongings, and then discover the theft herself. She would eavesdrop on phone conversations and report inappropriate behavior to Dominic. She would stage scenes that made competent professionals look careless and dangerous. 7 nannies in 2 years. 7 women who left the Castellano household confused and often in tears, their reputations damaged by accusations they could not disprove. And Lily, the true victim of this manipulation, grew more withdrawn with each departure, more silent, more afraid. Victoria told Dominic it was proof of the child's inherent problems. The rotating staff was making things worse, she said. Perhaps professional help was needed. Perhaps a specialized facility. She was laying the groundwork, brick by brick, for the final phase of her plan. But Victoria needed one more piece, one final element to make her scheme bulletproof. She needed a scapegoat, someone who would take the blame when things went wrong, someone poor and desperate and disposable, someone whose word would never be believed over the accusations of a wealthy socialite. Victoria needed a patsy. And then Rosa, the elderly Mexican cook who had served the Castellano family for 25 years, unknowingly delivered the perfect candidate directly into Victoria's hands. Her name was Emma Sullivan. Emma Sullivan arrived at the Castellano mansion on a Thursday afternoon, clutching a worn leather purse against her chest like a shield protecting her most precious treasures. She had taken 3 buses to reach Beverly Hills, transferring twice and walking the final mile because she could not afford the extra fare. Her shoes, simple black flats from a discount store, were polished to a shine despite the cracks in the synthetic leather. Her dress was second-hand, a modest blue cotton that she had mended twice at the seams, but it was clean and pressed and the best thing she owned. Emma was 28 years old, but her eyes belonged to someone much older, someone who had seen too much darkness, someone who had learned that the world was not kind to people without money or power or family to protect them. A thin scar circled her left wrist, pale and faded but visible if anyone cared to look closely. Most people did not. Rosa, the elderly cook who had quietly slipped Emma's handwritten resume into Dominic's paperwork, met her at the service entrance and led her through the kitchen. "You look nervous, Mija," Rosa said softly. "I need this job," Emma replied. "More than I've ever needed anything." Rosa nodded, understanding more than Emma realized. She had seen the desperation before, in the eyes of immigrants and refugees and people running from pasts they could not escape. "The boss is tough," Rosa warned, "and the woman, Miss Victoria, she is." The old cook paused, choosing her words carefully. "Be careful around her. Keep your head down. Do your work. Don't make waves." Emma nodded, but inside she was already calculating. The salary Rosa had mentioned was $3,000 a month, plus room and board, enough to pay for Tommy's medications, enough to start saving for the bone marrow transplant that would cost $200,000, enough to give her brother a chance at life. Tommy, her 16-year-old brother, the only family she had left in the world. Emma's mind drifted back, as it often did, to the beginning of their nightmare. She was 6 years old when the drunk driver crossed the median and hit her parents' car head-on. She remembered the funeral vaguely, a blur of black clothes and crying strangers. She remembered holding Tommy's hand, her baby brother only 3 years old, as a social worker explained that they would be going somewhere safe. The group home in San Bernardino was not safe. Mr. Crawford, the director, was a man who smiled for the inspectors and became a monster the moment they left. He beat the children for the smallest infractions, talking too loud, eating too slowly, looking him in the eye when he was in a bad mood. Emma learned quickly that the only way to survive was to become invisible, but Tommy was too young to understand. He cried at night. He wet his bed. He asked for their mother constantly, so Emma took the beatings for him. Every time Tommy made a mistake, Emma would step forward and claim responsibility. She would endure the belt, the closet, the nights without food, because she had promised her mother in those final moments at the hospital that she would protect her baby brother. She kept that promise with her blood and her bruises and her childhood. At 18, Emma aged out of the system with nothing but a high school diploma and a heart full of scars. She worked 3 jobs to support Tommy through high school: waitressing at a diner, cleaning offices at night, babysitting on weekends. She slept 4 hours a night and never complained. Then she met Derek. He was charming at first, handsome, attentive. He said all the right things and made her feel, for the first time in her life, like someone wanted her. The first time he hit her, he apologized for hours, cried, promised it would never happen again. It happened again, and again, and again. For 3 years, Derek controlled every aspect of Emma's life. He isolated her from the few friends she had made. He monitored her phone calls. He convinced her that no one would ever love someone as broken and worthless as her. The scars on her back, hidden beneath her modest dress, told the story of the night she finally escaped. Derek had come home drunk, angrier than usual, with a broken bottle in his hand. Emma still did not know how she survived. She remembered running barefoot through the streets of Oakland at 3 a.m, blood soaking through her shirt, and collapsing on the doorstep of a women's shelter. She never went back. She moved to Los Angeles for a fresh start, found a tiny studio apartment in a dangerous neighborhood, started rebuilding her life, 1 minimum wage paycheck at a time. And then Tommy got sick. Leukemia, stage 2, treatable with a bone marrow transplant, but the procedure cost $200,000. The hospital needed a deposit within 6 months, or Tommy would lose his place on the transplant list. 6 months, $200,000. And Emma had exactly $437 in her savings account. Rosa led her into a formal office where a man sat behind a massive black marble desk. Dominic Castellano looked exactly like the photographs Emma had seen in newspapers, the ones that called him a suspected crime boss and showed him leaving courthouses in expensive suits. He looked at her with cold gray eyes that seemed to evaluate her worth in an instant and find her lacking. But Emma did not flinch. She had faced monsters before. She had survived things that would have broken most people. She needed this job. Tommy needed that transplant. Emma Sullivan would endure anything to save her brother. Anyone. Dominic leaned back in his leather chair and studied the woman standing before him with the same cold calculation he used to evaluate business rivals. She was thin, too thin. Her cheekbones were sharp, suggesting meals skipped too often. Her hands, clasped in front of her worn dress, showed calluses and small scars from years of hard labor. Everything about her screamed poverty and desperation. He glanced down at the handwritten resume Rosa had slipped into his paperwork. No college degree, he said flatly. No certifications in childcare. No formal training whatsoever. You've never worked for a professional agency. Your references are a church pastor and my own cook. He tossed the paper onto his desk. Give me one reason why I should trust my daughter to someone with no qualifications. Emma did not flinch at his dismissive tone. She had faced worse. Much worse. You're right, sir, she said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. I don't have diplomas hanging on walls. I didn't study child development in a fancy university, but I raised my younger brother from the time I was 6 years old. I've taken care of more children than I can count, in places where there were no specialists or expensive programs. She met his cold gray eyes without looking away. I know when a child is crying because she's hungry. I know when she's crying because she's scared. And I know when she's crying because she's lonely and no one has held her close enough to make her feel safe. Those things cannot be learned from textbooks, Mr. Castellano. Dominic opened his mouth to respond with another dismissal. But before he could speak, a sound cut through the mansion like a knife. Lily's cry. It echoed down the marble staircase. That familiar, heartbreaking wail that had driven away 7 professional nannies. The clock on Dominic's desk showed exactly 6 in the evening. The difficult hour, the caretakers called it. The time when Lily became inconsolable, when nothing and no one could calm her. Dominic sighed, rubbing his temples. The headache was already forming. "That," he said, gesturing toward the stairs, "is what you would be dealing with. Every day, for hours. The best childcare specialists in California couldn't fix it." Emma was already moving toward the door. "If you can make her stop crying in 10 minutes, Dominic called after her, his voice heavy with skepticism, "the job is yours. If not, the front door is behind you. I won't even pay for your bus fare home." Emma did not ask for directions. She did not hesitate. She simply ran up the stairs, following the sound of a child in pain, the same way she had followed Tommy's cries through the dark corridors of the group home 22 years ago. Dominic remained at his desk, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the inevitable. The crying would continue. The woman would come back downstairs, defeated and apologetic. He would call the agency tomorrow and request another certified professional. But 5 minutes passed. The crying did not stop gradually. It did not fade into whimpers. It simply ceased, as if someone had pressed a mute button on the entire mansion. Dominic sat up straight in his chair. The silence was so complete, so unfamiliar, that for a moment he wondered if something terrible had happened. He rose from his desk and climbed the stairs 2 at a time, his heart pounding with an anxiety he could not explain. He pushed open the door to the nursery, and stopped. Emma sat in the antique rocking chair by the window, the one Elena had picked out during her pregnancy. Lily was curled against her chest, her tiny face peaceful, her breathing slow and even. The baby's fingers clutched a strand of Emma's hair, holding on even in sleep. Emma was singing softly, a simple melody that had no professional polish, no scientific basis for optimal brain development, just an old lullaby, passed down from mother to daughter for generations. "Hush, little baby, don't you cry. Mama's gonna sing you a lullaby." The same song. Dominic realized with a jolt that his own grandmother used to sing. The same song Elena had hummed when she was pregnant, her hand resting on her swollen belly. Emma looked up and saw him standing in the doorway. She did not startle, did not make excuses for sitting in the chair that had belonged to the lady of the house. She simply continued to rock gently, protecting the child's sleep. "She just needed to know someone was there," Emma whispered. "Someone who wouldn't leave." Dominic stared at his daughter's peaceful face, at the tiny fingers wrapped around a strand of brown hair, at the complete trust in her sleeping posture. Her body relaxed in a way he had not seen since Elena died. "You're hired," he said, his voice rough. "Start tomorrow." He turned and walked away before Emma could see the moisture gathering in his eyes. Dominic Castellano did not know it then, but he had just brought into his home the one person who would save his daughter's life. From her very first morning in the Castellano mansion, Emma did things differently. She ignored the imported German crib with its automatic rocking function. She set aside the scientific baby monitors that tracked sleep cycles and breathing patterns. She unplugged the Mozart mobile that the specialists had insisted was essential for cognitive development. Instead, she took an old cotton sheet from the linen closet and fashioned it into a simple wrap, the kind her grandmother had taught her to make when she was babysitting neighborhood children to earn grocery money. She tied Lily against her chest, close enough for the baby to hear her heartbeat, and went about her day. Lily rode along while Emma tidied the nursery, her tiny head tucked beneath Emma's chin. She stayed pressed against Emma's warmth while the nanny prepared bottles in the kitchen. She felt the steady rhythm of Emma's breathing while laundry was folded and floors were swept. And slowly, something miraculous began to happen. The constant crying stopped, not all at once, but gradually, like clouds parting after a long storm. On the 2nd day, Lily slept through the night for the first time in months. On the 4th day, she finished an entire bottle without fussing. By the end of the 1st week, the dark circles under her eyes began to fade, replaced by the healthy pink glow of a child who was finally getting the rest she needed. Rosa noticed the change immediately. "Dios mío," the old cook whispered, watching Emma carry Lily through the kitchen one afternoon. The baby was awake but content, her wide eyes taking in the world from the safety of her fabric cocoon. "She is smiling. I have not seen that child smile since." She crossed herself and did not finish the sentence. Every night, Emma sang the same lullaby, the simple melody her mother had sung to her before the accident, the song she had hummed to Tommy through countless nights in the group home, when they huddled together on a thin mattress and tried to pretend they were somewhere safe. Lily learned to anticipate it. By the 10th night, her eyes would grow heavy the moment Emma began to rock her, as if the song itself was a signal that everything was going to be all right. On the 12th day, the miracle reached its peak. Emma was changing Lily's diaper, making silly faces to keep the baby entertained. When it happened, Lily reached up, grabbed a strand of Emma's hair, and spoke. Emma, 2 syllables. 1 word. The first word Lily Castellano had spoken in 8 months of worried specialists and expensive speech therapists. Emma froze, tears springing to her eyes. That's right, sweetheart, she whispered, her voice cracking. I'm Emma, and I'm not going anywhere. Rosa heard about it within the hour. By dinner, the entire household staff was talking about the miracle in the nursery. The child who doctors had labeled as developmentally delayed was suddenly speaking. The baby who had been written off as damaged was blooming like a flower after rain. It is a miracle, Rosa declared, wiping her eyes with her apron. God sent us an angel, but not everyone in the Castellano household saw Emma as an angel. From the window of the master bedroom, Victoria Ashford watched Emma carry Lily through the garden below. She observed the way the baby clung to the nanny, the way Lily's face lit up whenever Emma spoke to her, the way a bond was forming that threatened everything Victoria had worked to achieve. Her manicured nails dug into the windowsill hard enough to leave marks. That evening, Victoria locked herself in the bathroom and made a phone call. Daddy, she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. We have a problem. That new nanny is ruining everything. The child is getting attached to her. If this continues, my plan will fall apart. Marcus Ashford's voice crackled through the speaker. Then eliminate the problem. You know what to do. Victoria smiled at her reflection in the mirror. Oh, I will. But I need to be careful. Dominic seems pleased with her work. I'll have to discredit her slowly, destroy her reputation piece by piece, until he has no choice but to throw her out himself. She ended the call and began to plan. The happiness blooming in the Beverly Hills mansion was nothing but the calm before a hurricane. Victoria had already begun her attack. The red Audi convertible screeched into the driveway 3 days after Lily spoke her first word. Emma was in the garden with the baby, letting Lily feel the grass between her tiny fingers and watching her giggle at the butterflies dancing among the roses. The morning sun was warm and gentle, perfect for helping a child who had spent too long trapped indoors learn to love the world again. The sound of the engine made Emma look up. The car door slammed with unnecessary force, and Victoria Ashford emerged like a storm cloud blocking out the sun. She wore white linen that probably cost more than Emma's entire wardrobe. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, not a strand out of place. Her designer sunglasses hid her eyes, but Emma could feel the coldness radiating from behind them. Dominic had left for New York that morning. A business emergency, he had said. He would be gone for at least a week. Victoria had been waiting for exactly this moment. You, Victoria called out, striding across the lawn without caring that her heels were sinking into the grass. Bring the child inside. Now. Emma stood slowly, gathering Lily into her arms. Miss Ashford, the pediatrician recommended outdoor time. The vitamin D is good for her development, and did I ask for your opinion? Victoria stopped directly in front of Emma, close enough that her perfume, cloying and sickly sweet, filled the air between them. Let me explain how things work in this house, Victoria said, removing her sunglasses to reveal ice-blue eyes that held no warmth whatsoever. Dominic may have hired you, but I run things when he's away, and I have rules. She began circling Emma like a predator examining prey. Rule number 1. You do not speak to Dominic unless he speaks to you first. If he enters a room, you leave. If he wants to see the child, you bring her and then disappear. You are invisible. You are nothing. Emma held Lily tighter, feeling the baby's fingers curl into her collar. Rule number 2. This creature stays in her room. I don't want to see her. I don't want to hear her. The nursery has everything she needs. There's no reason for her to contaminate the rest of the house. She's not a creature, Emma said quietly. She's a child, and children need sunlight and fresh air, and the slap came without warning. Victoria's palm connected with Emma's cheek so hard that her head snapped to the side. The sound echoed across the garden like a gunshot. Lily immediately began to whimper, sensing the violence in the air. Rosa, who had been watching from the kitchen window, gasped and covered her mouth. Don't you ever, Victoria hissed, grabbing Emma's chin and forcing her to make eye contact, contradict me again. Do you understand who I am? Do you understand what I can do to pathetic little nobodies like you? Emma's cheek burned. She could taste blood where her teeth had cut the inside of her lip. But she did not cry. She had learned long ago not to give abusers the satisfaction. I know everything about you, Emma Sullivan, Victoria continued, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. I know about the group home. I know about your boyfriend, Derek. I know about every pathetic detail of your miserable little life. She smiled, and it was the coldest thing Emma had ever seen. And I know about Tommy. Emma's blood turned to ice. 16 years old, isn't he? Leukemia? Such a tragedy. I understand he needs a bone marrow transplant. $200,000. The hospital has him on a waiting list, but those lists can change so quickly, can't they? Victoria leaned in closer, her lips nearly touching Emma's ear. One phone call from me, and your brother loses his spot. One word to the right people, and he gets moved to the bottom of every list in California. He'll die waiting for a transplant that never comes, and it will be your fault, because you couldn't keep your mouth shut and follow simple rules. Emma felt the world spinning around her. Tommy's face flashed through her mind. His pale skin, his tired eyes. The way he still smiled at her even when the pain was unbearable, telling her not to worry, telling her everything would be okay. Do we understand each other now? Victoria asked sweetly. Yes, Emma whispered, her voice breaking. I understand. Good girl. Victoria patted Emma's cheek, directly over the red mark her slap had left, and turned to walk back toward the house. Oh, and one more thing, she called over her shoulder. If you even think about telling Dominic any of this, remember what happens to your brother. I have friends in every hospital in this state. There's nowhere you can hide him from me. She disappeared inside, leaving Emma standing alone in the garden with a crying baby in her arms, and tears finally streaming down her face. That night, after Lily had fallen asleep, Emma sat in the corner of the dark nursery with her knees pulled to her chest. She cried silently, pressing her hand over her mouth so no one would hear. She thought about Tommy lying in his hospital bed. She thought about the transplant that meant the difference between life and death. She thought about Victoria's threats and knew, with absolute certainty, that the woman was capable of following through. She did not know that this was only the beginning. 1 week after the slap in the garden, Dominic left for Miami. Another business emergency. Another crisis that required his personal attention. He would be gone for 5 days, maybe more. He gave Rosa instructions for the household and nodded briefly at Emma before climbing into his Bentley and disappearing through the iron gates. Emma watched the car vanish down the tree-lined street and felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. 5 days alone with Victoria. For the first few days, Victoria seemed content to simply watch and criticize. She would appear in doorways, making snide comments about Emma's clothes, her hair, her accent, her very existence. She would order Rosa to prepare elaborate meals, and then complain that everything was inedible. She would pace through the mansion like a caged tiger, her heels clicking against the marble floors, her presence filling every room with tension. On the fourth night, at precisely 9:47 in the evening, Victoria struck. Emma had just put Lily down for bed. The baby was sleeping peacefully, her tiny chest rising and falling, her fingers curled around the corner of her blanket. Emma needed to prepare the next bottle, a simple task that would take no more than 3 minutes. She stepped into the hallway, her bare feet silent on the carpet. She never heard Victoria climb the stairs. Emma was in the kitchen, warming the bottle in a pot of water, when the scream tore through the mansion. Not a cry, not a whimper, a scream, the kind of primal, agonized sound that a child makes when experiencing real, physical pain. The bottle shattered on the floor as Emma ran. She took the stairs 3 at a time, her heart pounding so hard she could hear nothing else. The nursery door was open. Light spilled into the hallway, and inside, standing beside the crib with a porcelain coffee cup in her manicured hand, was Victoria. Lily was screaming, clutching her left arm against her chest, tears streaming down her red face. What happened? Emma gasped, pushing past Victoria to reach the baby. What did you do? Don't be ridiculous, Victoria said calmly, taking a sip from her cup. The clumsy thing tried to stand up in her crib and fell. I heard the noise and came to check on her. Emma lifted Lily into her arms, trying to soothe the hysterical child while examining her injury. The baby's forearm was bright red, already beginning to blister in a perfectly circular pattern, a circular pattern exactly the size of the bottom of a coffee cup. Emma's blood turned to ice. She looked up at Victoria, and in that moment, she saw the truth. It was written plainly in those ice-blue eyes, in the slight curve of those perfectly glossed lips, in the complete absence of concern for the screaming child. Victoria had done this deliberately. She had pressed a hot coffee cup against a 2-year-old's skin and burned her on purpose. You, Emma breathed, her voice shaking with rage and horror. You burned her. Victoria's smile widened. Did I? That's a very serious accusation coming from a nanny with no qualifications and a criminal ex-boyfriend. Who do you think Dominic will believe? His sophisticated fiancé from one of the most respected families in Los Angeles? Or a desperate little orphan who would say anything to keep her job? She set down the coffee cup on the dresser, deliberately, making sure Emma saw exactly what she was doing. "Here's what's going to happen," Victoria continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You're going to clean up that child, you're going to treat that burn, and you're going to keep your mouth shut. And if I don't?" Victoria laughed, a cold, musical sound that made Emma's skin crawl. "Then I call the police tonight. I tell them I caught you pressing a hot object against my stepdaughter's arm. I have connections in the LAPD, Emma. Very good connections. You'll be arrested within the hour. The charges will be child abuse, which means you'll never work with children again. You'll go to prison, where I'm told they're not very kind to people who hurt babies." She leaned closer, close enough for Emma to smell her expensive perfume mixing with the scent of fresh coffee. "And while you're sitting in a cell, I'll make one phone call. Just one. And Tommy will be removed from the transplant list. He'll die slowly, painfully, wondering why his big sister abandoned him." Emma felt tears burning in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "You're a monster," she whispered. "I'm a pragmatist," Victoria corrected. "Now clean up that child and remember your place." She turned and walked out of the nursery, her heels clicking against the floor, not bothering to look back at the baby she had just tortured. Emma held Lily close, rocking her gently, whispering soothing words even as her own heart shattered into a million pieces. She carried the baby into the bathroom and ran cool water over the burn, applying aloe vera from the first aid kit, wrapping the wound in clean gauze. Lily eventually stopped crying, exhausted, and fell into a fitful sleep in Emma's arms. Emma sat in the rocking chair all night, holding the baby against her chest, staring at the tiny bandaged arm. Victoria had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. She had hurt an innocent child, a defenseless 2-year-old who had never done anything to deserve such cruelty. And Emma was powerless to stop her. Or was she? Emma looked down at Lily's sleeping face, so peaceful now, so trusting. This child had no one else. Her father was absent and blind. Her mother was dead. The only person standing between Lily and a monster was a broke, scared, desperate nanny with nothing but her own 2 hands. Emma pressed her lips against Lily's soft hair and made a silent promise. "I will protect you," she whispered into the darkness, "even if it costs me my life." 3 nights after the burning, Emma could not sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Lily's tiny arm, red and blistered. She heard the scream echoing through the mansion. She felt the helpless rage that had no outlet, no release, no way forward. At 2 a.m, she gave up trying to rest. Lily was sleeping peacefully in her crib, the burned arm carefully bandaged, her breathing slow and steady. Emma decided to go downstairs for a glass of water, hoping the cool liquid might calm the fire in her mind. She padded barefoot through the dark hallway, avoiding the floorboards that creaked, a skill she had learned in the group home where making noise after lights out meant punishment. The mansion was silent except for the soft hum of the climate control system and the distant ticking of a grandfather clock in the foyer. She was halfway down the stairs when she heard voices. Emma froze, one hand gripping the banister. The sound was coming from Dominic's private office, the room with the black marble desk where he had interviewed her weeks ago. The door was slightly ajar, allowing a sliver of golden light to spill into the dark hallway. Victoria's voice, unmistakable in its icy precision, floated through the gap. Emma knew she should turn around. She should go back upstairs, get her water from the bathroom sink, forget she had heard anything. Getting caught eavesdropping would give Victoria the perfect excuse to have her fired, or worse. But something in Victoria's tone made her pause. Something cold and calculating that sent shivers down her spine. Emma crept down the remaining stairs, her bare feet silent on the marble. She pressed herself against the wall beside the office door, close enough to hear but hidden in shadow. "The trust fund documentation is very clear, Miss Ashford," a man's voice was saying. Educated, professional, the voice of a lawyer. $50 million, held in trust for Lily Elena Castellano until her 21st birthday. The funds are completely untouchable until then. Unless what, David? Victoria interrupted. "That's why I'm paying you $500 an hour. Find me the unless." Papers rustled. The lawyer, David, cleared his throat. "There is one provision. Section 7, paragraph 3. If the beneficiary is deemed mentally incapable of managing her own affairs, if she is diagnosed with severe psychological disorders requiring institutional care, then guardianship and financial control transfers to her legal custodian. And if I marry Dominic, I become that legal custodian. Technically, yes. As the stepmother and spouse of the biological father, you would have a strong claim to guardianship, especially if Mr. Castellano were to grant you legal authority over his daughter's care. Victoria laughed, and the sound made Emma's blood run cold. Dominic will sign anything I put in front of him. He's so consumed with grief and work that he barely looks at documents anymore. I've been practicing his signature for months. The man is completely blind when it comes to domestic matters. Even so, the lawyer continued cautiously, proving mental incapacity in a 2-year-old would be extremely difficult. Children that young don't receive psychiatric diagnoses easily. That's where you're wrong, David. Victoria's voice dropped lower, and Emma had to strain to hear. I've already consulted with specialists. If a child shows signs of severe developmental delay, catatonic episodes, uncontrollable fits, and inability to respond to normal stimuli, she can be classified as severely disturbed. The recommendation would be immediate placement in a specialized facility. What kind of facility? There's a lovely private institution in Switzerland. Very exclusive, very discreet, very far from Los Angeles and anyone who might ask uncomfortable questions. The waiting list is years long, but my father knows people on the board. Emma's hand flew to her mouth to stifle a gasp. And how exactly do you plan to make a healthy 2-year-old exhibit these symptoms? The lawyer asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer and was simply documenting the conversation for his own protection. Victoria's response was delivered with chilling casualness. Children are fragile, David. A few drops of sedative in her milk, administered regularly over several weeks, and she'll start showing all sorts of concerning behaviors: lethargy, unresponsiveness, failure to meet developmental milestones. The doctors will see exactly what I want them to see. That's extremely dangerous. Sedatives in those doses could cause permanent brain damage in a child that young. That's rather the point, isn't it? If she ends up genuinely impaired, all the better. Makes the case even stronger for institutional care. Emma felt her knees threatening to buckle. She pressed harder against the wall, forcing herself to remain standing. And what about the nanny? The lawyer asked. She seems quite attached to the child. If she notices changes in the girl's behavior, she might become suspicious. Victoria's laugh was like broken glass. Emma Sullivan is the best part of this entire plan. When Lily is finally committed, when the authorities come to investigate how such a tragedy could happen, who do you think they'll blame? Not me, the grieving stepmother who tried so hard to help. No. They'll blame the unqualified nanny with no credentials, the woman with a history of domestic violence, the desperate orphan who was probably drugging the child herself to keep her quiet. You're going to frame her. I'm going to destroy her. By the time I'm done, Emma Sullivan will be in prison for child abuse. Her brother will be dead from lack of medical care, and I'll be sipping champagne in Switzerland while managing $50 million of my stepdaughter's money. The lawyer was silent for a long moment. That's quite a plan, Miss Ashford. I've had months to perfect it, David. Now, let's go over the paperwork one more time. I want everything ready to move forward the moment that new nurse arrives. Emma could not hear anymore. She backed away from the door, her whole body trembling so violently she could barely control her movements. She made it to the staircase and climbed on shaking legs, one hand pressed against the wall for support. Victoria was not just cruel. She was not just abusive. Victoria was planning to destroy Lily's mind, to turn her into a vegetable, to lock her away in an institution on the other side of the world, all for $50 million. And Emma was meant to take the blame for everything. She reached the nursery and stood over Lily's crib, watching the baby sleep peacefully, unaware of the nightmare being planned for her. Emma knew too much now. If Victoria ever discovered that she had overheard that conversation, she would not simply threaten Emma with job loss or Tommy's medical care. She would kill her. The nurse arrived on a Monday morning, 3 days after Emma overheard the conversation in Dominic's office. Her name was Patricia Cole. She was a thin woman in her late 40s, with sharp features and cold, calculating eyes that reminded Emma of a bird of prey. She wore a crisp white uniform and carried herself with the rigid authority of someone accustomed to controlling others. Victoria introduced her as a pediatric specialist hired to assist with Lily's care. Given the child's developmental issues, Victoria explained with false concern, I felt it was important to bring in a professional. Patricia comes highly recommended by the finest agencies in the city. Emma knew immediately that something was wrong. Patricia's credentials looked impressive on paper, but there was something in the way she looked at Lily. Not with warmth or compassion, but with cold clinical detachment, the way a scientist might examine a laboratory specimen. What Emma did not know, could not know, was that Patricia Cole had been fired from a psychiatric facility in Arizona 3 years earlier. The charges were never proven, but the accusations were damning. Patient abuse, unauthorized medication, falsifying medical records. She had escaped prosecution only because the facility chose to settle quietly rather than face public scandal. Victoria had found her through her father's network of less-than-legal contacts, a perfect accomplice who would do anything for the right price. From Patricia's first day, Emma found herself systematically excluded from Lily's care. "The nursery is now under my supervision," Patricia announced, blocking the doorway when Emma tried to enter for the morning routine. "Miss Ashford has assigned you to household duties: laundry, cleaning, kitchen assistance. The child requires professional medical attention, not amateur babysitting." Emma tried to protest, but Victoria appeared behind Patricia like a shadow. "Is there a problem?" Victoria asked sweetly. "I thought you would appreciate having lighter responsibilities. Unless you're not satisfied with your position here?" The threat was clear. One wrong word, and Emma would be thrown out. Tommy's face flashed through her mind. The transplant waiting list, the hospital bills piling up. "No problem," Emma said quietly, backing away. "I understand," but she did not stop watching. Every day, she observed Patricia administering what she called vitamins to Lily. Small doses mixed into the baby's milk bottle. Patricia was careful, always turning her back, always shielding the process from view. But Emma noticed the slight change in the liquid's color. She recognized the faint chemical smell that lingered in the nursery, and she saw the effect on Lily. The vibrant, laughing child who had blossomed under Emma's care began to fade. Lily stopped smiling. She slept for hours at a time, far more than any healthy 2-year-old should. When she was awake, her eyes had a glazed, unfocused quality, as if she were looking at the world through a thick fog. Emma tried once to examine the vitamin bottle when Patricia left the room. She had just reached for it when Patricia's hand clamped around her wrist like a vice. "What do you think you're doing?" "I was just organizing the supplies," Emma stammered. The bottle looked out of place. Patricia's eyes narrowed. "The medicine cabinet is off-limits to household staff. Touch anything in this room again, and I'll report you to Mr. Castellano personally." She released Emma's wrist, leaving red marks on the skin. The final blow came that Friday. Dominic returned from a business trip to find Victoria waiting in the foyer, tears streaming down her beautiful face. "What's wrong?" he demanded, immediately alert. "It's my grandmother's diamond bracelet," Victoria sobbed. "The one I told you about, the family heirloom. I've looked everywhere, and it's gone." I didn't want to believe it, but Patricia found it hidden in Emma's room, under her mattress. Emma, who had been carrying a basket of laundry through the hallway, froze. "That's impossible," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've never touched your jewelry. I've never even been in your room." But Patricia was already there, holding up a glittering diamond bracelet that Emma had never seen before in her life. "I found it myself," Patricia confirmed, hidden exactly where Miss Ashford suspected it might be. Dominic's eyes turned to ice. "Emma," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "My office. Now." The conversation that followed was short and brutal. Dominic did not shout. He did not threaten. He simply looked at Emma with those cold gray eyes and told her that this was her final warning. "One more incident," he said, "and you're gone. No references. No severance. Nothing." Emma wanted to scream the truth. She wanted to tell him about Victoria's plan, about the poison in Lily's bottles, about the conversation she had overheard. But who would believe her? She was nobody. A broke, desperate nanny with no credentials, no evidence, and no allies except an elderly cook who was too afraid of losing her own job to speak up. That night, Emma sat alone in her small basement room, her back against the cold wall, her hands shaking. Victoria was winning. The trap was closing. Soon, Lily would be too sedated to recognize anyone, and Emma would take the blame for everything. But Emma Sullivan had not survived the group home by giving up. She had not escaped Derek's fists by surrendering. She had not kept Tommy alive through years of poverty and struggle by accepting defeat. She was backed into a corner. She was outmatched and outgunned, but she was not beaten. Not yet. At 3 a.m, Emma sat on the cold floor of her basement room with her cheap prepaid phone pressed against her ear. "Emma? Is everything okay?" Tommy, her baby brother, 16 years old and fighting leukemia. His voice sounded thinner than 2 weeks ago, more fragile. "I just wanted to hear your voice," Emma lied, wiping tears from her cheeks. "Something's wrong," he said. "Emma, what's happening?" She broke. The words poured out. "Victoria, the burn on Lily's arm. The plan to drug a 2-year-old into permanent brain damage. The scheme to steal $50 million and frame Emma for everything. If I try to stop them, they'll make sure you lose your place on the transplant list," Emma sobbed. "They'll kill both of us." Silence stretched across the line. When Tommy spoke, his voice was stronger than she had heard in months. "Emma, you've spent your whole life protecting me. You took beatings in the group home. You worked 3 jobs so I could finish school. You gave up everything to keep me alive, because you're my brother, and now there's another child who needs protecting, a little girl who has no one else. You can't let them hurt her. Not for me. But the transplant, I would rather die knowing my sister did the right thing than live knowing an innocent child was tortured because of me. Emma closed her eyes, remembering every moment she had chosen to fight instead of flee. I love you, Tommy. I love you too. Now go save that little girl. The next morning, Emma began collecting evidence. She waited until Patricia left the nursery, then grabbed a vitamin bottle and replaced it with an empty container. She hid it in a loose floorboard in her room. She began recording with her old phone, every conversation near Victoria or Patricia. Eventually, she would catch something useful. The final piece came from Rosa. The elderly cook found Emma crying in the pantry and sat beside her. I know what they are doing. Mija, I have seen the changes in the little one. You are not alone. Rosa agreed to help, watching Victoria's movements and providing alibis. By week's end, Emma had drugged vitamins, partial recordings, and one loyal ally. It was not much, but it was enough to fight. What Emma did not know was that Victoria had grown impatient. Dominic was returning early from New York. She could not risk him noticing changes in Lily. That evening, Victoria decided tonight would be the night. Emma was ready to fight. But the final battle was coming sooner than she expected. The clock on the nursery wall showed 9:47 when everything changed. Dominic had called that morning to say he would be in New York until the following afternoon, a meeting with international investors that could not be rescheduled. He sounded tired, distracted, completely unaware of what was happening in his own home. Victoria waited until the call ended, then smiled at Patricia. Tonight, she said simply. We finish this tonight. Patricia nodded, her cold eyes betraying no emotion. The higher dose will cause a seizure within hours. Possible brain hemorrhage. By morning, the child will be beyond saving. Perfect. Make sure Emma is nowhere near the nursery. I want her alibi to be airtight when the police start asking questions. Emma was in the kitchen, helping Rosa with dinner preparations, when she heard footsteps on the stairs. Patricia's footsteps, moving quickly, purposefully, toward the second floor. Something in Emma's gut twisted. She set down the vegetable knife and wiped her hands on her apron. Rosa, I need to check on Lily. The old cook looked at her with knowing eyes. Be careful, Mija. Emma climbed the stairs as quietly as she could, her heart pounding against her ribs. The nursery door was closed but not locked. Through the gap at the bottom, she could see shadows moving inside. She pressed her ear against the wood. Patricia's voice, clinical and detached. Hold still. This will only take a moment. Lily's whimper, the soft clink of glass. Emma did not think. She did not plan. She simply acted. The door flew open, crashing against the wall. Patricia stood beside the crib, a syringe filled with clear liquid in her gloved hand. Lily lay in the crib, her eyes half closed, already sedated from the earlier dose of vitamins. Get away from her, Emma screamed. Patricia's head snapped up, her expression shifting from surprise to cold fury. You stupid girl. You should have stayed downstairs where you belong. Emma lunged. She grabbed Patricia's wrist, forcing the syringe away from the crib, away from Lily. The two women crashed against the dresser, sending bottles and picture frames shattering to the floor. Patricia was stronger than she looked, her fingers clawing at Emma's face, her knee driving into Emma's stomach. But Emma had survived worse. She had survived Mr. Crawford's belt. She had survived Derek's fists. She had survived 28 years of a world that had never shown her mercy. She would not let this woman touch Lily. The syringe flew from Patricia's hand and skidded across the floor. Emma threw herself toward the crib, scooping Lily into her arms, pressing the groggy child against her chest. That was when Victoria appeared in the doorway. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled. Her white silk robe flowed behind her like a ghost. Her ice-blue eyes surveyed the chaos with nothing but cold calculation. Well, Victoria said calmly, this is inconvenient. Stay back, Emma gasped, retreating toward the corner of the room. I know everything. I heard you talking to the lawyer. I know about the trust fund, the drugs, everything. Victoria laughed. The sound was beautiful and terrible, like wind chimes in a graveyard. And who will believe you, a desperate orphan with no credentials against the future Mrs. Castellano? Victoria stepped closer, her heels clicking against the hardwood. Patricia, pick up that syringe. It seems we need to adjust our timeline. Patricia retrieved the syringe from the floor, her eyes fixed on Emma. The girl knows too much, Patricia said. She needs to be eliminated. Agreed. Victoria's smile widened. Double the dose. Enough for both of them. Tomorrow morning, the authorities will find a tragic scene. The mentally unstable nanny who poisoned her charge and then herself in a fit of guilt. Emma pressed her back against the wall. Lily clutched tightly in her arms. The baby was stirring now, whimpering softly, sensing the danger even through the fog of sedation. "You're insane," Emma whispered. "I'm practical," Victoria corrected. $50 million buys a great deal of practicality. Patricia advanced, the syringe raised. Emma closed her eyes, shielding Lily with her body, preparing for the needle's bite. And then a voice cut through the room like a blade of ice. "Touch either of them, and you die where you stand." Everyone froze. The door had opened silently. No one had heard the footsteps on the stairs. No one had noticed the shadow falling across the threshold. Dominic Castellano stood in the doorway. His gray eyes were colder than Emma had ever seen them. His jaw was clenched so tight the muscles in his neck stood out like cords of steel. His right hand rested inside his jacket, where Emma knew he kept a gun. "Dominic!" Victoria gasped, her composure cracking for the first time. "Darling, this isn't what it looks like." The nanny attacked Patricia. She was trying to hurt Lily. I was trying to stop her. I heard everything. 3 words. Quiet. Deadly. I've been standing outside that door for 3 minutes. I heard every word about the trust fund, the drugs, your plan to destroy my daughter's mind for money. Victoria's face went white. "Marco called me 2 hours ago," Dominic continued, his voice never rising above a whisper. "He said something felt wrong. So I took an earlier flight. I came home to find my fiancé planning to murder my child." The door stood open behind him. The hallway stretched into darkness. And Dominic Castellano, the most feared man in Los Angeles, stood between his daughter and the monsters who had tried to destroy her. His gray eyes burned with cold fire. He had heard everything. The silence in the nursery was absolute. Victoria's face cycled through emotions before settling on wounded innocence. "Dominic, thank God you're here." She rushed toward him, tears forming instantly. Emma attacked Patricia. "She's been drugging Lily. We caught her trying to inject the baby." Dominic did not move, did not blink. "She's lying," Emma said from the corner. "She planned everything." Victoria spun around. "She's desperate." "Dominic, darling, you know me." "I would never," I said. "I heard everything." Dominic stepped into the room, his movements slow and predatory. Every word. The trust fund, the 50 million, the plan to destroy my daughter's brain, the Swiss institution. Victoria's mask cracked. "You misheard?" Emma was screaming. "You couldn't possibly." Dominic walked past her as if she did not exist. He picked up the vitamin bottle and brought it to his nose. His jaw tightened at the chemical smell. Then he approached Emma. "Show me her arm." Emma gently shifted Lily to reveal the bandage. Dominic peeled back the gauze and went rigid. The circular burn mark, perfect, deliberate, the size of a coffee cup. His mind flashed through memories. Lily screaming when Victoria entered. Lily clinging to Emma like a safe harbor. Lily speaking her first word, not Daddy, but Emma. "Children do not lie." "Marco," Dominic called. The bodyguard appeared instantly. "Take Miss Ashford and her accomplice to the basement. They don't leave until I decide what happens." Victoria's composure shattered. "You can't do this. My father will destroy you. Your father will receive evidence of his daughter's attempted murder of a child. I suspect he'll protect his reputation. Not you. I'll tell the police everything about your business." Dominic turned to face her. The look in his eyes made Victoria's words die. "You tried to kill my daughter. You drugged her. You burned her. You planned to destroy her mind for money." He stepped closer. "There is nowhere you can run. No one who can protect you," Victoria sobbed. "Dominic, please. I loved you. Get her out of my sight." Marco dragged Victoria toward the door. She screamed, clawing at the doorframe. "You'll regret this. I'll destroy you." The door slammed shut. Patricia was taken next, silent and resigned. Then the nursery was quiet. Dominic stood motionless, his back to Emma. Slowly, he turned. Emma remained in the corner, Lily wrapped in her arms, still shielding the baby even now. She had protected his daughter when he had failed. She had risked everything to save a child that was not hers. The mafia boss who had ordered executions without flinching felt something crack open in his chest. The nursery fell into profound silence. Victoria's screams faded down the hallway, swallowed by the thick walls. The only sounds remaining were Lily's soft whimpers and Emma's ragged breathing. Dominic stood motionless, his shoulders trembling, the weight of everything pressed down on him like a physical force. His daughter had been poisoned under his own roof. His fiancée had planned to destroy her mind for money, and he had been blind to all of it. Slowly, Dominic turned to face Emma and Lily. The nanny was still pressed against the wall, arms wrapped protectively around the baby. Her cheek was bruised, her uniform torn, but her brown eyes were fierce and unwavering, the eyes of a warrior who had refused to surrender. Dominic stepped forward. Emma tensed, pulling Lily closer. "It's all right," Dominic said softly, his voice cracking. "You're safe now." Lily stirred in Emma's arms, her tiny head turned toward her father's voice. Her honey-colored eyes focused on his face, and then she reached out her small hand. Da. Dominic's heart stopped. The first word his daughter had ever spoken to him. Da. Something shattered inside him. Every wall he had built since Elena's death, every barrier around his frozen heart, every lie about protecting his daughter by staying away. He fell to his knees. The most feared man in Los Angeles crumpled onto the floor. He reached out with trembling hands, and Emma placed Lily in his arms. The moment his daughter pressed against his chest, Dominic broke. He pulled Emma into the embrace as well, one arm around Lily, one around the woman who had saved her. He held them both and wept. These were not quiet tears. These were violent sobs that shook his entire body. Tears locked away for 2 years, finally breaking free. "Forgive me," he choked out. "I almost lost her. I almost let them destroy her." Emma was crying too. "You came back in time. That's what matters. Because of you." Dominic looked into her eyes. "You saved her when I failed." "She needed someone," Emma said simply. "Every child deserves someone who will fight for them." Dominic looked at Lily, nestled against his chest, tiny fingers curled around his tie. "I don't deserve her," he whispered. "Then become someone who does." That night, for the first time since Elena's funeral, Dominic did not retreat to his office. He carried Lily to the rocking chair by the window and sat with his daughter cradled against his heart. He held her tiny hand and watched her sleep, and in the quiet hours before dawn, the ice around his heart finally began to melt. The police arrived within the hour. Dominic made the call himself, shocking everyone in his organization. The mafia boss who spent decades avoiding law enforcement was inviting them through his gates. But this was about his daughter. Paramedics examined Lily immediately. A blood test confirmed dangerous levels of sedatives in her system, enough to cause permanent damage if dosing had continued another week. "She's lucky," the specialist told Dominic. "A few more days, and we would be having a very different conversation." Lucky, because a desperate nanny had risked everything to protect her. Victoria was arrested that night. Attempted murder, child abuse, conspiracy to commit fraud, her designer clothes replaced with an orange jumpsuit. She screamed about her father's connections. None of it mattered. Patricia Cole was taken as an accomplice. Her past record surfaced, adding charges of practicing medicine without a license. 3 days later, FBI agents intercepted David Chen at the Mexican border with suitcases of cash. He provided testimony against Victoria for a reduced sentence. The trial was swift. Victoria received 25 years without parole. Patricia received 20. David Chen received 15. Marcus Ashford publicly disowned his daughter within a week. 2 months later, Dominic called Emma into his office. She entered hesitantly, still wearing her simple uniform, still unsure of her place. Dominic pushed an envelope across his desk. "Open it." Inside was a check for $500,000 and medical documents from Mayo Clinic. "Your brother Tommy has been moved to the top of the transplant list," Dominic said. "The best oncology team will handle his case. This covers everything, plus his college education." Emma stared at the papers. "This is too much. You saved my daughter's life. No amount can repay that." Tears streamed down Emma's cheeks. "There's more," Dominic continued. "I want you to stay, not as an employee. Lily needs you. So do I. Stay as family, Emma, family." The word hit her like a physical blow. She had not been part of a family since she was 6 years old. 22 years of being told she was worthless, and now someone was offering her a home. Emma could not speak. Silent sobs shook her shoulders. For the first time in her life, someone said she belonged. 6 months later, the Castellano mansion was unrecognizable. Not the building itself. The marble floors still gleamed. The chandeliers still sparkled. The garden still bloomed with roses and jasmine. But the atmosphere had transformed completely. The house was filled with laughter. Tommy Sullivan, now 17 and cancer-free after a successful bone marrow transplant, sat at the kitchen table doing homework while Rosa prepared his favorite meals. His cheeks had color again. His eyes sparkled with the energy of a teenager who had been given a second chance at life. Lily Castellano, now 2.5 years old, toddled through the hallways with confidence and joy. Her vocabulary had exploded in recent months. She called Emma Emma, with pure adoration in her voice. She called Dominic Dada and raised her arms every time he entered a room, demanding to be picked up. And Dominic always picked her up. The mafia boss, who had once spent 18 hours a day at the office, now rarely worked past 5. He had delegated most of his business operations to trusted lieutenants. His priorities had shifted completely. He learned to change diapers, something that had terrified him more than any rival gang. He read bedtime stories, doing silly voices for each character until Lily giggled uncontrollably. He sat on the nursery floor playing with blocks and stuffed animals, his expensive suits forgotten in the closet. Rosa watched these changes with tears in her eyes. "This is what a home should be," she told Emma one morning. "Not a museum, not a fortress, a place full of life and love." One golden afternoon, Dominic stood at the window of his study, watching Emma and Lily play in the garden below. Emma was chasing Lily through the grass, both of them laughing. Tommy had joined them, lifting his niece onto his shoulders and spinning her around. The sound of their joy floated up through the open window like music. Dominic thought of Elena. For the first time, the memory did not bring crushing pain. Instead, he felt warmth, gratitude, peace. Elena would have loved Emma. She would have been proud of the father Dominic was becoming. She would have wanted him to find happiness again. "I'll always love you," Dominic whispered to the sky. "But I think it's time to live again." That evening, the 4 of them sat around the dinner table together. Dominic at the head, Emma beside him, Tommy across from them, Lily in her high chair, smearing mashed potatoes on her face and giggling. They were not connected by blood. Their paths had crossed through tragedy and circumstance, but sitting there, sharing food and laughter and love, they were undeniably a family. Rosa served dessert with tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. "This," she said softly, "is what Signora Elena always wanted for this house." And in the garden, where a mafia boss had once collapsed to his knees and wept, children now played in the sunshine. Their laughter echoed off the walls that had known so much silence and sorrow. Sometimes miracles do not come from money or power or status. Sometimes miracles come from the simplest thing in the world, a heart willing to love. This story reminds us of profound truths, that children need love more than luxury, that healing begins when we stop running from our pain, that family is not defined by blood but by the choice to care for one another, and that even the darkest hearts can find redemption when they open themselves to love. Did this story touch your heart? We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Tell us which moment moved you most. Share how this story connects to your own life experiences. Your words inspire us to create more meaningful content every day. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Join our community to receive more touching stories delivered to your screen daily. We wish you good health, happiness, and peace in your life. May love always find its way to your heart. Thank you for watching. Goodbye, and we will see you in the next video.